I'm Sister Judith T. Barial. I'm a sister of the Holy Family for over 60 years. My childhood, I was born in Mobile and raised in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And I lived a sort of an insular life, you know. I lived in a black Catholic family, black Catholic neighborhood, church, I should say, and I lived an insular life. And the only people who were not black in my life were those who my parents worked for, or I'd see when I go downtown. And then when it was time for me to come to high school, although there was a Catholic high school in walking distance from my home, I was not accepted there. I was not welcome there. So my brother, older brother, and some of the other young men from the parish would catch the Greyhound bus and go down to Biloxi to a black Catholic high school. This was before Rosa Parks sat on the bus, so my mom didn't want me riding the bus. So both parents took extra jobs and sent me here in New Orleans to St. Mary's Academy boarding school, where I met the Sisters of the Holy Family, and the rest is history. Okay, it was in boarding school. You know, I was there with the sisters. It was the first time I'd been around African American sisters. I'd been taught by Irish sisters and we had Irish priests. And I was just so taken up with these women who looked like my mom and my aunt and my grandma, and who spoke to me like I was their child, like I was their relative. And I just fell in love with them in the way of life. Of course, in boarding school, we lived like nuns almost, you know, went to Mass every morning and ate at special times and all of that. And a lot of people wonder, you know, most of my friends didn't want to be nuns and couldn't understand why I wanted to be one. But I was just drawn to these women who were so human yet so holy, and that just appealed to me because that's where my mother was, so that's how my vocation grew through being around the sisters 24/7 for 4 years, just about. Okay, because I'm a teacher. I'm 80. I'll soon be 81 next month, and I'm still teaching. I teach chemistry at St. Mary's Academy. I've been teaching continuously, and I've taught mostly girls, but I taught in Lafayette. I taught in a boys' school. I mean, a mixed school, boys and girls. And then I was in Belize in Central America for 14 years. That was the most beautiful time of my religious life. I went there a little bit down, and the people there, they healed me. I was ministering in a place in Central America, in Belize, and Dangriga was the name of the place. And it's mostly, the people there were African descent, but a group of them were Garinagu. And they came over on slave ships like my ancestors did, but the ship crashed around St. Vincent, out of St. Vincent. And so they swam to shore and they mingled with the Carib Indians there, so they also were called Black Caribs. But they maintained their African culture. They have the language, they did the customs, the dances, the foods. They were agrarian like the Africans. I felt that was the closest I'd ever get to my motherland. And that was a wonderful time for me. And while I was there, I started a school there, a little program, first of all, for the young people who couldn't go to the high school because they only had one high school, and about 14 villages fed into that one high school, so they only took a very few students. So I started a little program started with the girls who couldn't get into that program. Couldn't get into the high schools, and it was a 2-year program. They'd get a little certificate and go out and start making babies and get married. And the boys came and asked me to come. So the school is still in existence. It's a high school now. It was accredited in 1995 as a high school. It was started in 1987. And it's still very dear. Our sisters went there in 1898 when our community was just 50 years old. And a bishop from Honduras, because at that time it was British Honduras, came to the United States looking for people to teach these Garinagu African-based people. They had just come into the island. And the Mercy sisters wouldn't go, and they were the ones who were in Belize at the time. So he came to the United States looking for nuns to go there And they had Jamaican Jesuit priests there, I think. And he happened to come to New Orleans where we had this black community, and our Mother Superior at the time, Mother Austin, she jumped to that opportunity and took 4 nuns down to Belize. So we were there since 1898, our first mission outside of the U.S. Henriette Delille, our sisters went in 1898. We had been founded for 50 years. And that mission was the first mission outside of the country. But we know that it carried out Mother Henriette Delille's legacy to reach out to those most in need. Mother Henriette, in order to understand Mother Henriette, if there are people who don't know, she was a free woman of color who founded the community. And to understand her, we have to go back to her great-great-great-grandmother, who was a slave, Nanette, and her great-great-great-grandfather, who was Joseph du Barial, who was an engineer for New Orleans. His title was chief engineer for the king or something like that. And these were her great-great-great-grandparents. And the French, we know the French had their slaves baptized, and they also they had the Placide system where they had a concubinage with free women of color. So that was the background of Henriette Delille, her great-grandmother, her grandmother, and her mother in the Placide system. Henriette's mother was placed with these young white planters, French and Spanish. And Henriette Delille's mother was placed in Placide with Henri Delille and Jean Delille. And she had 3 children, Henriette, Cecile, and Jean Junior. And so Henriette, the French also educated their children with these concubines. And so Henriette went to school. The Ursulines had a school for free girls of color, and also the Mount Carmel sisters. And so Henriette, we believe, went to this school along with her friend Juliette, who was a Haitian free woman of color. And after a while, this school was turned over to a sister, St. Marthe, who was from France. She wasn't Ursuline, she was a hospitalier from France. And during that time, when Henriette and Juliette went to school there, she was their teacher. I wrote a play about Henriette, and in that play, I had Henriette and Juliette doing what we did as children, hang around the sisters after school and pestering them, supposedly helping them, but mostly pestering them with all kinds of questions. So I picture Henriette and Juliette doing that. And the following Sister St. Marthe, she went in the afternoons to visit the sick, go pray the rosary with old ladies in the church. I'd also visit the slave quarters. So we believe that Henriette and Juliette followed Sister St. Marthe on these evening excursions and began to look at that kind of life and, say, hey, I think I like this. And finally, probably shyly said to Sister St. Marthe, we're going to be nuns like you. And Sister Marthe, after a while, let them know that, no, you can't be an Ursuline, you can't be a Carmel, but maybe go to France and be a nun there. And so, no, we want to stay here for our people. And the words our people meant the slaves and the free people of color. So that's what they did. And being free women of color, they were still taken care of by their fathers until they were placed with somebody. So they had the leisure of not having to really work, so they volunteered around the church. They taught after they finished their education, they taught other free girls of color, but they also, not lawfully, taught the slaves. And so that began their ministry of teaching. They were just young women. Some others joined them who would just volunteer to do this. Then after a while, they decided to join together like a club. And they got rules and regulations and maybe a little dues. But they called themselves Sisters of the Presentation, but they were just a group of young women, lay women. And during this time, St. Augustine's Church is being built by the free people of color. And I guess a lot of people heard about the war of the pews. The church was being built, and the free people of color decided to buy pews so they'd have a place to sit. And then the other people started buying pews. And I understand that the free people of color bought pews also for the slaves. And the little priest who was there, Pierre Etienne Roussillon, saw Henriette and Juliette and the work that they did with the people. And I believe that he put a bug in the bishop's ear, about these women, look what they're doing, And of course, the bishop had been looking at them at the corner of his eye, I say. He knew what was going on. But eventually, he had them enrolled in what's like a sodality, enrolled with Rome as a sodality. And that kind of gave them at least some recognition, the church seeing what they were doing. And then they made private vows. They made private vows at St. Augustine's Church after it was dedicated. Not the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. It was just a vow to be of service in the church, sort of. And after a while, the bishop sent them to the Madams of the Sacred Heart in St. James Parish to learn how to be nuns, to make it a sort of a novitiate, a year or so. And then they came back and they made their vows. Meanwhile, Pierre Roussillon had gotten them a house. They were living together, and the community had donned a little black dress, like a habit. And they began seriously the work of taking in old elderly people, especially slaves who had been freed and have no one to take care of them. So it started the first nursing home, Catholic nursing home in the United States, really, that still exists, a foreign nursing home. And so that's our two ministries. They have been our ministries, teaching and caring for the elderly up to this minute. We're still doing those two basic things. Our ministries are spread through most of the United States, southern United States, at different times, different places. We've been, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Oklahoma, California, DC, and during the integration phase of the church, our sisters were an exchange program where we went up north to some areas and taught, and some of the Suetonian sisters and other sisters came down south and taught in our schools. So we've had a lot of experience in education and working with the elderly. Okay, it's very important for Henriette's story and the story of all the other persons who are up for canonization, black saints. It's really important for their story to be told because history repeats itself. Henriette saw the slave trade. She saw African Americans being mistreated. Fast forward to Trayvon Martin. Fast forward to Floyd. So the work is still there. The ministry is still there, and the challenge is that as I was growing up, I used to say I'm a fourth class minority. I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm Catholic, and I'm a nun. And I took them as challenges. But now as I grow older, those were really blessings. And each one of those things that I say that made me a minority, also it was a challenge for me to be the best of those things. But another black organization that I just want to mention here that was so powerful in our black community and was very powerful in my life, and that's the Knights of Peter Claver. But my mother at 18 joined the Ladies Auxiliary, and they sent her to be a delegate to the first convention. And she came back with such good minutes that they sent her every year as a delegate. So she got to travel, she got to meet other people. It really enriched her life so much. And then she became Grand Lady, she still was going. And then she decided to save up, and every year she would take one of the children with her. And after a while, as some of us got out of the way, she began taking the whole family. And I say my mother, but my father was always there. But my mother was the fourth. My dad was kind of quiet, and he did what he had to do and did it well, but quietly. And later on, my mother, she did different jobs, from maid to this, and she got to be a cafeteria manager. And she used to hire young African American girls who dropped out of high school, finished high school, and had a child. And she would hire them to help in the cafeteria. And then after 1 year, she would take them over to the junior college and have them register. And after so many times, the registrar over there asked her, "Miss Barial, do you have a college degree?" She said, "No, I just finished high school." So she said, "Well, you can get a degree." So at 65, my mother got her degree And so this is my background, and but it's very important that we still, support Black Lives Matter. This wonderful global incentive now for everybody to look at the dignity of people, and so we're getting ready for our chapter this summer, and so even though we are older now, and we're looking at how we can still be vibrant in our area, and especially in social justice. And we've done quite a few things. Prior to the COVID, we haven't done as much since the COVID. However, we are looking forward to, we're trying to find innovative ways that we can still serve even though we are older. We're still alive, we're still getting vocations. We have 2 people in temporary vows. We have 1 novice and we have 1 young person who's just beginning. So we aren't dead, but we know that there may be a time to wean out, but we're trying to continue to be in the present moment, leaning toward the future. And so that's our stance right now, That's my stance and the stance of my community. Yes.